Now we're ready to head into outer space, and my mistake at the top of the show, I told you it was Pleiadians, it's Pleiadians.
Exactly right. I knew that.
Billy's been talking to. Brad Staggs has been talking about UFOs, and he's here today to talk about Billy Meier.
Yes, and today it does get a little strange, I will have to admit. Pleiades is the star cluster in the nighttime sky, which can be seen throughout the northern continent. This man, Billy Meier, his full name is Edward Billy Meier. They call him Billy because of his affinity for the Old West in America. He has claimed to have contact with beings from the star cluster known as Pleiades. Now, whether or not you believe that is a different story, but the pictures that he has taken, the things that he has said, and this is a man with only a 6th grade education, and he has come back and brought technical terms from these contact meetings that he's had in the forest in Switzerland. People have driven him to these contact points, and he's come back with very technical information that no one understands how a man with a 6th grade education would know these things. This is probably the most documented case in UFO history, and we will meet the people who have done that. Colonel Wendell Stevens, Tom Welch, and Lee and Britt Elders have conducted this investigation into the Billy Meier case. Now, what you're about to see is a little bit hard to believe, but prepare yourself for this.
Hallo, wir sind an den Fluss. Oh, guck mal, was ist hier alles gibt. Guck mal, ein Engel. Wenn wir uns da hochgehen. Nee, nicht da hoch. Da hoch willst du jetzt.
Wir sind hier auf der Erde, unser Leben zu führen, das Bewusstsein.
We are here on Earth to lead our lives because our consciousness must be developed so that it gathers knowledge, gathers wisdom, builds up love, peace, freedom, and harmony. The human exists in the material life on Earth in order to learn, just as other humankinds do on other worlds in the entire universe.
Im gesamten Universum dasselbe tun. Mein Name ist Eduard Albert Meier, genannt.
My name is Edward Albert Meier, but all around the world I am simply called Billy. I received the name in Tehran when I was on the road, and since then this name has remained with me.
Dieser Name geblieben. Meine Kindheit, die war
I'd say in and of itself, my childhood was very good and very pleasant for me. I learned very much on the one hand because of my parents, and on the other hand because of an extraterrestrial called Svath, whom I got to know in 1942.
How old were you then?
I was 5 years old. And this man, Svath, taught me very much of my school knowledge, besides many other things, just as Pastor Emanuel Zimmerman did. Then I confided in the pastor, and he told me I did not need to be afraid. He explained to me what telepathy is.
Dem Pfarrherrn anvertraut und der hat gesagt, dass ich keine Angst haben muss. Der hat mir erklärt, was die Telepathie ist.
Whenever I ran off, Svath helped me to hide somewhere, or he took me in his spaceship, and he flew somewhere with me where we could talk and where I could learn from him.
Raumschiff genommen und ist mit mir irgendwo hingeflogen, wo wir uns unterhalten konnten und wo ich lernte.
Show. Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here. Billy Meier is a soon-to-be 70-year-old man living in Switzerland. Meier has one arm. He lost his arm in about 1965. He started to take photographs of UFOs in 1964. He claims that his first contacts with extraterrestrials took place when he was only a 5-year-old boy.
That there is more photographic evidence and video evidence for this particular case than any other existing case. And it's almost so good that you're just like, holy cow. When he took a lot of this material, took these photos, there was no Photoshop, there were no home computers. If these had been hoaxes, his designs for these craft are quite interesting.
These official contacts with extraterrestrials, taking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs and films and everything else that followed, the skeptics would like us to believe that this man, with no resources, working as a night watchman and on a partial disability pension, with one hand, is not only a master model maker, filmmaker, photographer, digital and special effects person, videographer, metallurgist, electronics genius, sound recording engineer, knowledgeable about topography and map making, geography, ancient history, mining, ores, agriculture, and 30 other disciplines that he's brought to bear in terms of the information in this case. They will credit him with that, but they won't say, hey, the guy's telling the truth, he's the one that's meeting with these people. In 1958, Meier sent to the 25 European countries about 115, 120 specific predictions. The United States of America will be engaged in 2 wars with Iraq. The second war will be conducted under a president who is the son of a former president. The second war will lead to an unbelievable disaster. The end game is this, and this has been said even before we launched the war in Iraq pertaining to U.S. military policies. Unless the United States withdraws from all military bases and from all wars and stops sticking its nose in everybody else's business around the world, there will be a third world war which will eliminate 3/4 of the population of the planet. It will devastate the North American continent. We will be among the hardest hit. All of our major cities will be destroyed. We are in for a bad time. And I said, Billy, I remember reading in the prophecies that Russia is said, it's a high likelihood Russia will invade Iran as well as Turkey and then go into Scandinavia and this and that. This is all stuff allegedly published thousands of years ago before we even knew about it, Russia. And I said, but now America and Israel are talking about attacking Iran. And he said, well, I'll tell you this. If your country attacks Iran, there's an enormous likelihood that Russia and China, which are becoming closer all the time, will attack your country.
And that's actually been spoken about as a possibility for a while.
It's already in prophecies that they published years ago that I've even put in one of my newsletters. Of course, that's bothered a lot of people, but they should also be bothered that Meier has spoken very harshly about radical Islam, Russia, China, laundry list. He was also told in January 2005 that AIDS has mutated and taken some new forms that are fast-acting and produce from the HIV full-blown AIDS within a matter of weeks. Now, they've also said that there would be a cure for AIDS coming, there would be a vaccine that would either occur or be in development by 2006. I haven't heard an update on what that is, but with this problem with the new strains of AIDS, they've just said very clearly this is something that your scientists don't know as much as they think they know about most matters. The case is so full of prophetic, predictive information that wherever you can actually check and see, did it happen? Is this what's happening? Okay, it happened. Are the details the same? Yeah, the details are the same. Well, who published it first? In every case but one that I know of, Meier published it first.
To become a 5-year investigation. Before it is over, they will be embroiled in controversy and forced to use every resource at their command.
Hi, Billy. Nice to see you here again. Yeah, I brought my friend's been telling you about. This is Britt Elders.
Hi, good to meet you.
Lee Elders.
His name is Edward Meier. He is called Billy, an old nickname that sprang from his fondness for heroes of the American West. Buffalo Bill, Wild Bill, and Billy the Kid. He is a farmer. He claims he has been in contact with beings from another world. He also claims to have proof of these contacts.
Mr. Meier, when did the experiences begin?
The contact begins on January 28, 1975 in Hinwil.
Mm-hmm. How did it happen? What made you go outside into the forest?
I got something like a very light voice in my head. I heard something to leave the house, to go out and to take a photo camera with me. So I left my house, and then when I was far outside from the village, I heard a singing noise in the sky, and when I was looking up there, I have seen a disc. This disc was flying over the clouds, and then it came to the point where I was staying with my motorcycle. Then slowly it comes lower and lower and set it down between the white trees and the forest there behind.
Mm-hmm. Meier later photographs the impressions left by the disc's tripod landing gear. The grass has been pressed and swirled in a counterclockwise direction. Even a year later, the grass has not sprung back, but Meier notes that the impressions swarm with insect life.
Then I have seen a person who came out of the disc.
Person came out?
Yeah. And when the person came out of the left side of the trees there, I have seen that it is a woman.
Mr. Meier, what did they look like?
She looks like a human from this earth. Like you, like I, like human beings from this earth.
You call us extraterrestrials, and you attribute to us superhuman powers. But we are like you. We too are still far removed from perfection and must evolve constantly, just like yourselves.
After the first words, we turned and was going to this tree here.
You walked over here?
Yeah.
How tall was she, Billy?
It's about 1 meter and 70 centimeter.
About like that? Show a little bit.
About like my size.
Ah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sits chest here and I here. Sit down.
Ah. And you sat here and talked to her?
Yeah. Then we was talking here for about 1 hour or 1 hour and a quarter, something like that.
Did she give you a name? What did you call her?
Yeah, she told me her name is Semyase.
Semyase?
Yeah.
Billy, what kind of feeling did you have sitting here under this tree with a woman who just landed in a spacecraft?
I wasn't afraid about these things. I was afraid about the army only, because they have a station somewhere there behind the forest. But I wasn't afraid about the disc.
Where do they come from, Mr. Meier?
They shall be coming from the star picture of the Pleiadians.
The Pleiades, a bright star cluster some 500 light-years from Earth. Although the cluster consists of hundreds of stars, 7 stand out clearly to the naked eye. The Greeks call them the nymphs of heaven. We call them the 7 sisters.
What was going through your mind? What did you want to talk about?
You see, my head was full of questions, but the most of the time she was telling me, and I hadn't many chances to ask her something.
Several times we have tried to establish contact with the humans, but usually those selected were not willing. They were afraid others would consider them liars, or mad, or would try to destroy them.
You see, the first she told me I shall get the most best pictures of UFOs, what's ever happened on Earth. And the second thing, I shall go out to tell the truth to the human on Earth, why they are coming to here, what reason they have, that they are coming to Earth not to harm us, not to make war, not to bring peace, just to bring a teaching.
Why are they interested in us, a society thousands of years behind them in technological development? According to Meier, we share common ancestors.
A case that stretches the boundaries of imagination and the very fabric of what we know as reality.
Put on my camera.
We're taking movies, right?
Yeah.
This is actual 8mm movie footage shot by Meier of the Pleiadian craft. He claimed not only that he had photographed their ships, but that he had even met with the Pleiadians several hundred times at their request.
He's always referred to it as getting a cooling sensation across his forehead, like a slight breeze of air. And that was telling him that they were in the vicinity to go out and get on his moped and ride, and to get away from civilization as best he could so that they could have a one-on-one contact with him.
I think the underlying structure of the conversations is that it's time that the Earth human realize they aren't the only thinking beings in the universe. They talked about some scientific information, but nothing in detail, just little tiny pieces to a great big puzzle.
Meier kept a journal of his contacts, writing most of what was said.
You call us extraterrestrials or starmen, and you attribute to us superhuman powers, even though you do not know us. Regarding this, we are men like you, but our knowledge and our understanding exceeds yours considerably, especially in the technical field.
The messages to Meier made perfect sense and were apparently meant to be shared with the rest of the world.
We have to take care of ourselves as a planet because we don't only affect our future, but we affect everything in the universe.
He claims to have met a man called Emmanuel, and Emmanuel, according to the information in the case, would be the man who we know as Jesus Christ, or at least the Jesus Christ figure would be, according to the Meier material, a fictionalized version of a real man who lived 2,000 and some years ago, who indeed was crucified but survived the crucifixion.
Als Immanuel gelebt hat,
When Emmanuel lived, who was later falsely named Jesus Christ, and who never had anything to do with the religion which was made from his teaching.
zu tun gehabt mit dem, was aus seiner Lehre als Religion dann entstanden ist.
Emmanuel was not an extraterrestrial. He was therefore a human being from this world, begotten by an extraterrestrial with a terrestrial woman named Mary, and was born here on the earth as an earth human.
Irdischen Frau namens Maria gezeugt und hier auf der Erde als Erdenmensch geboren.
Und warum hat Asket dich And why did Asket present you to him?
I don't actually want to say anything about that.
Nicht sagen.
What is the Talmud of Jmmanuel?
The Talmud of Jmmanuel is a document. It came about when Billy Meier and Isa Rashid, who was a former Greek Orthodox priest, were led telepathically to an area outside of Jerusalem by the Pleiadian, and they found and dug their way into an abandoned ancient tomb. The stones on the floor, concealed for a while, for 2,000 years apparently, resin-encrusted, animal skin-wrapped scrolls, which they took out and removed from that location. When they opened up one, they found they were in Aramaic. So Isa Rashid took the scrolls, began a translation process. In something like 7 years, he sent Meier about 1/3 of these scrolls, translated from the Aramaic, in which they originally were, into German. He let Meier know that he was now virtually on the run with his family for their lives. He told Meier that there were certain religious factions of a couple major religions that found out that he had these scrolls and that wanted to take possession of them themselves. The information would prove to be enormously heretical. After Isa Rashid had translated a chunk of them, he took them and his family into a refugee village in Lebanon, hid the scrolls in the walls. It's said that within about a week's time, the Israelis came in and destroyed the entire village. The scrolls were destroyed, along with many of the structures and people who lost their lives. Isa Rashid and his family escaped with their lives into Iraq. And 4 years later, Meier found out that Isa Rashid and his entire family had been machine gunned to death, ostensibly by the Mossad in Baghdad. For instance, Emmanuel foretold the coming of another prophet. He named him as Muhammad. He claimed that while this man would be a true prophet, his teachings would also be corrupted and a false and evil cult would be created from them that would give the Israeli people, the distant descendants, no peace until the end of time, unless, hopefully, both the Israelis and their enemies could make a conciliatory and honest peace with each other. The Talmud of Jmmanuel contains prophecies about the fires that would darken the sky when greedy and power-hungry people would ignite the very oil of the earth. The Talmud of Jmmanuel was discovered in 1963. The fires from the Gulf War that darkened the skies did not occur until 1991, 18 years after the Talmud was discovered. There are two artifacts that are shown in this book that Meier discovered in the tomb where the Talmud of Jmmanuel was discovered. The first one was a small figurine that Meier says was left by the Indian healers with Emmanuel, the men who came and ministered to him over those 3 days while he was sequestered in the tomb. The other artifact is a piece of gypsum that Gabriel allegedly gave to Emmanuel. Both of these were left for Meier to discover, as he did centuries later.
Als ich 1964 in Indien war,
When I was in India in 1964, I lived in the Asoka ashram outside of Marauli with a monk named Dharmawara, from whom I also learned a great deal. It was then that the opportunity arose for the first time for me to photograph spaceships, that is to say, beam ships.
Große Möglichkeit gegeben war, dass ich Raumschiffe respektive Strahlschiffe fotografieren konnte.
And that is my grandfather when he was in his late 80s, and myself a year and a half before I left to come to the United States to pursue my university studies. As I continued my university studies, I have forgotten all about that contact. It never stayed in a place in my mind where it is utilized. I went on finishing my graduate work, went to help my country, became a diplomat, was sent back to New York to represent my country at the United Nations. Worked at it for 12 years. One day I was cleaning and came across the book again. So I thought before I threw it away, I should look at it. I opened the page and saw the name Ashoka Ashram. So I was wondering, how could our place be named in this book? As I browsed through it, I saw the stories. And immediately, I thought, I bet you it was the same Swiss person that had stayed at our place when I was a child. If he's the person that I knew, if he has a monk, it's the same person. So Wendell wrote to him, and I think Wendell said within an hour, Billy wrote back. A few months later, I flew out. We sat and talked for 3 straight nights without sleep. It was almost like I felt I have returned home and he felt he has returned home. So it was just sharing of some part of him that he has not been able to share so much with a lot of people before.
She seems like her body language is congruent. So it's in other words, when she's speaking, her hands move with whatever is going on. She's saying, I remember this. Typically, if I was lying, I wouldn't throw something like that in because I'm trying to get through it as quick as possible. So she goes into little snippets of the story. I would say that the way she's presenting it, either she's rehearsed it really well or she's telling what she believes in.
So this ship would appear, usually would be around the same time as I have the visitation, or sometime this was taken by Billy Meier.
This is the place, Bergerumlicum, where I took that picture.
Show us how you took the picture, Billy.
Oh.
Meier takes the team to other contact sites and demonstrates how he operates his cameras.
I have here a small wheel to turn the film, and I can get the picture.
Where was the ship exactly when you took it that day?
You see there is standing Wendell.
Yes.
It was about that place.
Hovering above Wendell to some degree, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
You see, on this way I put on my camera.
For taking movies, right?
Yeah.
With a film camera on a tripod, Meier can shoot stills with his 35mm camera at the same time.
And then I can start to film. Here I got the movie when was the ship hanging there up, and when it after was jumping by side.
Jumped?
Yes, jumped. It jumped away nearly so fast than the speed of light.
By jumping, Meier means the ship disappears and reappears.
Each time I got electrical hit when the ship was jumping, and at later time they told me there shall be a very strong power field, electrical power field, and from that out I always got the electrical hit.
By electrical hit, Meier means an electric shock. He also noted a light shift at each event.
Billy, how many sightings have you had here?
On this place I had one...
Meier takes the investigators to over a dozen sites, describing the craft, which he calls beam ships, and relating the information he says the Pleiadians gave him.
Are there any other groups coming here, Billy?
How they told me there are each year about 22, 23 different civilizations They come to here to work here, study here, visit here. And other thing, there are, together with the Pleiadians, working here on Earth about 8 other groups, but they not belongs directly to the Pleiadian civilizations.
But they work together with the Pleiadians.
They work together with the Pleiadians.
So there's an association of some kind between the Pleiadians and some others that are also...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, how long have they been coming here?
For the past 13,500 years about.
13,000?
Yeah. And here we are on the place now where I got the movie picture. You see here, you see there the road, and on the middle of the distance to the road was the ship hanging in the air and bubbling in a very strong wind. And in the background on the road was driving cars from Teilingen to Rumlikon and from Rumlikon to Teilingen. But if somebody have seen something about the ship out of the cars, I don't know.
You didn't hear anything after that?
No, nothing. No.
But there are other witnesses to some of the sightings. Ernst Keller-Müller lives down the mountain from the Meier farm.
And what did you see from here, sir?
Wat zijn ze gezien? Ik had twee gesichtet, we saw the lights and then they disappeared and then they came on again. That's why he noticed it.
And then what happened?
Wat is nog passiert?
Dann hat sich das, was abgeleuchtet hat, hat sich dann leicht abgesenkt, ein Stück weit.
That one that had the light going below also went down.
Went down to the ground?
Not all the way to the ground, but the other ones stayed in the same place and this one went further down.
Isn't that the direction of Schmid-Ruti over there?
Yes, that's the direction of Schmid-Ruti.
Have you ever heard of anything going on over there in the Schmid-Ruti area?
A couple of days later he called Schmid-Ruti to find out.
Did you know Mr. Meier at that time?
En zie dat hij Meier is gekend.
Nee.
And then behind us the forest, it was a little light.
Bernadette Brandt, a computer programmer.
So? And it jumps like a ball.
Like it bounced?
Like a ball. It goes up and down and up and down. When it goes up, no, the same greenness. When it goes up, it was white, and when it goes down, it was red.
The nearest thing to a government official in the area is the postman in the village of Schmid-Ruti.
Have you seen any of the photographs yourself?
Only 2 or 3.
Do you believe them?
He says he can't imagine how you can take a picture like this. He is the kind of a guy who only believes what he sees himself.
Jakob Bertschinger works the farm with Meier.
Okay, he saw the light ball going away from here, from him, it's in that 45-degree angle. 45-degree angle? Well, that's right. And he can't tell how far it was very difficult to say. But then it stood still, that ball of light, and changed direction, came directly towards him with an unbelievable speed.
My name is Elsie Moser. I'm living in Niederglatt. I am a school teacher. The first time when I saw it, it was up here. I saw it with about 7 other people.
Were you frightened?
No, not at all. I was thinking, oh, well, okay, now I have seen one.
Guido Moosbrugger is not a neighbor. He lives about 2 hours away in Austria. He heard about the Meier experiences and came to see for himself.
Have you ever had any experience with Billy in connection with these things that are going on here?
Yes, I have seen a few demonstrations myself, especially at night, and was present at the landing site doing one landing, and I saw other things. A lot of things happened in those 6 years.
You have seen things with your own eyes. Did you ever photograph anything?
I was allowed 2 times to photograph at night. As we sat inside the car, we saw all of a sudden to the north, above the meadow, out of nowhere, a fire-red disk, about as large as a headlight.
And then what happened?
And then it suddenly disappeared. Then there was a short pause, after which, at the same place again, appeared all of a sudden a silvery white ball. Then there was another pause, and then the same ball appeared again. It flew toward us, got larger and larger, then shrunk, collapsed, and then, like magic, it was gone. And best of all, it looked like a shower of sparks.
In all, over 30 other witnesses corroborate Meier's testimony. The contacts continue at a furious pace, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. Meier claims to have had over 130 meetings. He has taken hundreds of photographs and has over 3,000 pages of notes.
For a long time, we've had an urge to contact someone who sincerely wants to be helpful in our mission. Here and there, we open such contacts with inhabitants of different worlds, but only when they have developed enough to become rational, thinking beings. Then we prepare them for the thought that they are not the only rational, thinking beings in the universe.
Britt questions Calliope, Meier's wife, whose nickname is Poppy.
Poppy, how long have you and Billy been married?
Now, 60 years.
And you were married in Greece?
Yes.
Uh-huh. What did you think when Billy first told you about these experiences?
Her English shaky, Poppy reverts to German.
Ja. Ein bisschen schwierig am Anfang gewesen. It was difficult at the beginning. Weil because she never knows anything about this case. Oh, she didn't know? No. When did she find out? She says Billy takes a long time that her tell her something from the UFO. And then how did you feel about it?
Beunruhigt einerseits, weil
and she was thinking why this happened all to me. Billy shows her every time the picture that he takes, and so she was knowing about from the picture from the UFO. But she was very critical about this case and asked him some questions about all this case, and it was very difficult for Bobby.
So Mike, what's this photograph that we see here?
This is a photograph that Billy Meier took in 1975 of a landed UFO, the only one of this type that he was able to take. It was from this photograph that the special effects expert Wally Gentleman, who had been a director of special effects in 2001, designed and had made 2 UFO models at the MGM Special Effects Studio. In these photographs, we see Billy Meier with those models.
You mean 2001, the Kubrick film?
Yes.
And what's the difference between these models versus, photographs that Billy Meier took of actual UFOs?
Well, I think we're going to take a look at some of that. For instance, here we can see in this film the model, one of the models being handheld and walked about the property. There were very specific technical differences that were observed, but in this film, we see an object that some people might say is a model. It's hovering above what appears to be a tree and in front of a house.
Is this one of his films? Or?
This is one of Billy Meier's films, his earliest film from 1975. Some people would think by a string, but as you see this move off to the side, you notice the UFO hung for a moment at an angle, which is something that's impossible to effect with an object on a string.
But it looks like so shaky and like being pulled up and down.
Yes.
And is this the usual way they fly?
No, this was a demonstration flight, and some of what was accomplished here was the characteristic and to be expected movements would come from an object, a pendulum-like object, an object on a string. And then we see these other smooth and flowing movements as the UFO is moving about the tree. We're told that this was done for a couple of reasons. One, to actually demonstrate flight in a terrestrial environment, and 2, to also give an out to skeptics who would have to say this cannot be an object from outer space. It would be too threatening to their belief systems.
However, at a certain point, we can actually see the top of this tree swaying under the backwash of the UFO. And if we look back at the very opening of this film, we will notice that there's a great deal of space between the UFO and the sky, making it very, very unlikely that it could be an object suspended on a string.
And why is this film so like blurry and like looks like an old film? I mean,
well, it is an old film, shot in 1975 on a snowy and rainy day, according to Meier, and shot from a distance. So what we're seeing here is a rather poor quality film, to be sure, and we're just having to make the best of it ourselves in our understanding.
Is this tree still there today?
The tree is no longer there, as is the case in a couple of the other films and photographs that Meier took.
And what do we see here?
Here is a much clearer film segment that Meier took with a UFO hovering above a road, and we can see a car moving slowly to the left in the bottom.
Oh yeah,
of
that
this
white
frame.
dot there, yeah.
The white dot. We're going to see another one in a moment. We also notice that there is a tree branch with some leaves to the left. Meier was encouraged oftentimes to have objects in the foreground for perspective and calculating the distance. Here the craft has moved suddenly to the left, and it's exhibiting a characteristic floating motion that we're told is really the craft riding on the magnetic field of the Earth. In this film, we can see an object, a toy made in the 1990s, invented by physicists, called a levitron, that exhibits this type of movement as this object in these repeated frames floats above the base. We dissolve here into Meier's UFO as it too is exhibiting that type of hovering, pulsing movement on the magnetic field of the Earth as he was told. Now watch as the object will suddenly dart away in one frame, disappearing from view.
How is that possible?
Meier was told that they have technologies that allow them to move out of phase, out of dimension, within a part of a second. They can not only move out of dimension that quickly, they can also pop back into dimension. When the films were examined at Nippon TV, they discovered that indeed there had been no cutting and that the object not only disappears in one frame, but pops back in one frame just as suddenly as you see here.
So where does it go while it's gone?
Well, that's a good question. As we observe it here disappear one more time, we can wonder just exactly where it goes. I don't have an answer for it. That's Billy Meier in the lower middle of the film. He's walked into the film. He'd set up his camera on a tripod as we again see one of the UFOs hovering in the distance. And again, notice that it has this movement, the slight pulsing up and down movement as it rides on the magnetic field of the Earth.
And this film?
This film, Meier has the UFO as it comes in closer. He also zooms in on it a bit, and we will see two very dramatic effects of a light flashing there from the top.
There, yeah.
You see it? And then from the rim of the ship.
Why is it flashing like that?
That was not explained. As a matter of fact, when Meier mentioned it to them, to the extraterrestrials, they were surprised at that effect, and they wanted to see the film too. We see it again go on there. Now, as you watch this film, in a moment you're going to be able to observe more clearly that the craft is actually above the Earth. There's a bit of a hill or mountain just below the time codes there. So clearly this was photographed outside. This was filmed outside. And this is one of the films that the owners of Uncharted Territory, the Academy Award-winning special effects house, they viewed this film and determined that it was not a hoax. In this film, we see three of the UFOs, again in the distance with tree branches in the foreground, as they hover at slightly different angles in relationship to each other, exhibiting again the pulsing movement and changing distance ever so minutely between them. Uncharted Territory said that if they could duplicate Meier's films, they would have to go to CGI to do it because these clearly are not models.
And what is this right here?
This is the beginning of a series of photographs that Meier took of what's called a light or energy ship, allegedly piloted by beings from the Andromeda Galaxy who are partially physical and partially non-physical. Very high-level, high-energy beings. They did not communicate directly with Meier, and he could not communicate with them. Interestingly enough, Lee and Britt Elders, two of the original investigators on the case, claimed that they also saw a phenomenon in the night skies like this in Switzerland while they were investigating the case. Photoshop expert David Biedny claimed that Meier had simply used a light fixture photographed against a black background to hoax these photographs, in particular one that he claimed was a double exposure. When another special effects movie expert who'd been in the business for 50 years viewed the same photograph that we're about to see in just a moment, he said that it was not a double exposure at all, but a triple exposure that must have been taken accidentally in camera. When Mr. Biedny was challenged to duplicate this photo to prove his point, he declined to even try.
Is it this photograph right here?
This is the one. Now, in the next one, this one, which is clearly not a double exposure, Mr. Biedny wouldn't even comment on it. This poses a problem for the skeptics because it clearly was not done outside the camera.
And what is this thing that looks so interesting?
Well, that's our wedding cake UFO. This was the only other landed UFO that Meier was able to take photographs of. And interestingly enough, in very much the same location as the energy ship when it was photographed in the previous photographs, right above the center. We see here a more clear view of the base of the ship taken from this angle, and as we get closer to it, even a little more clarity. These photos of the wedding cake UFO were called hoaxes by many people who thought that it was merely a garbage can lid with various appliances and accessories somehow put onto it. However, when the original investigators were able to calculate the measurement, it turned out to be some 10 feet in diameter. When they took these photos to a metallurgist to ask if he could reproduce it in 1980 or 81, he said it would cost about $25,000 to make this object. Here, an even larger wedding cake UFO is photographed over a van on Meier's property, and Meier photographs it as well from underneath. These are very controversial photographs of the wedding cake UFO glowing a golden color at night. Here you can see various artifacts, trees, and perhaps light poles in the background. In this next photograph, Meier has a close-up of it, even larger, closer to the camera. And here, a telemeter disc moves off to the side, and the photograph of the tree and the car caused problems for skeptics who claim that this is really just a model tree and a model car. Here we can see the most dramatic of those photos as Meier photographs focusing on the distant large UFO, which is behind the car and not in front of it. Here the object is now clearer, hovering, and we can see the base of the UFO at night as it glows golden color with various protuberances underneath. In this next photograph, the center or the core, the top core of the UFO, the sleeve has been extended. If you take your time to do some measurements on it, you'll see that it's actually a different configuration.
When was this video taken?
This was taken in 1981, outside. Meier has the camera set up. This is his first video camera. And the UFO here is about 200 to 300 feet in the distance as best we can calculate. Meier snaps some of the photographs here. He'll then leave the frame. He'll go out of frame again for a while before coming back in. Some skeptics had claimed that this was really false perspective, that it was small model trees set up close to the camera. For anybody that's been to Switzerland, rural parts as well, and especially near where Meier lives, many solitary trees appear on these hillsides, and they look all too good to be true unless you're familiar with the fact that there's a very vibrant life force. The trees are clear, solitary on many occasions. Here, this solitary tree has the UFO hovering virtually motionlessly in front of it.
How is that possible? In the other films, it was moving. Here, it's like standing still.
Well, it seems that the UFOs can be controlled consciously by the Pleiadian. People have to think that through for themselves and see if they accept that idea. This is a photograph, a formerly top-secret photograph of one of the Nazi UFOs, the German UFOs that were developed during the early part of the Second World War, supposedly with the help of extraterrestrials who, upon further determining the nefarious intentions of the Nazis, input into the designs elements that caused these craft to not be able to function as the Germans had hoped they would. Nonetheless, it's said that during the Second World War there was an intense bombing run by the Allies. 800 bombers were sent up. Only 2 of these craft were sent up and were able to destroy 200 of the Allied bombers, according to Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens.
How did the Nazis supposedly get these UFOs?
Supposedly they were helped by an extraterrestrial race that thought that the Germans at the time would develop and utilize these craft to bring about a more peaceful world here. And this only goes to show that, extraterrestrial or not, whenever human beings are involved in something, things can and ultimately will get messed up.
You mean they talked to the Nazis and gave them UFOs?
They apparently input the information telepathically to Nazis, or at the time German scientists, who were unaware of the contacts themselves. They thought that they were developing these objects themselves. And after the Second World War, some of these objects survived, and some of the Germans fled to South America with them. Different countries came into possession of these plans, such as the United States, Canada, Russia, and England. Other countries as well, later, such as France and China, developed this type of alternative craft, which, while it does not have the capability of true interplanetary, let alone interstellar spacecraft, is used even today to create UFO sightings around the world. So we are told by the Pleiadian and Meier that the greater majority of so-called UFO sightings are actually craft that are U.S. and other secret military craft. The danger still being that a false UFO ET attack could be launched by one country or another in order to bring people under martial law and worldwide control. These are the only known photographs taken from within a UFO above the Earth, with 2 other UFOs visible. Meier took these from inside Semyaze's ship. In this final photograph, we even get a clearer view of the Earth and land below. We're looking at photographs taken of Meier holding a laser beam-type weapon on July 6, 1977. The photographer is the woman Manara, who brought him this weapon, an antique 600-year-old beam-type weapon.
He looks a lot younger here than in the movie.
He was about 40 years old at this time.
And this is like another film of his?
This is shot on the same day. This was actually the second time that a weapon like this was brought to Meier, and they decided to both photograph and film him handling the weapon during this time.
So does anyone else ever touch this weapon, or was Meier the only one?
Well, Meier was the only terrestrial person to handle the weapon. Manara was the person who brought it, and another woman named Alina. Also, we'll see her in a little bit. We have some photographs of her. The weapon had some very unusual characteristics.
Like what?
Well, the weapon was said to have a range of 37.2 kilometers, and it had a screen on it that Meier could look into and see up to that distance, as if whatever he was looking at was close at hand. All he had to do was concentrate then on the target, whether it would be a little piece of a tree or another vehicle or whatever, and press the trigger, pull back on the trigger, and that beam would travel as far as necessary to destroy the object in question.
So he could basically steer the weapon with his mind?
Well, this weapon wasn't fully steerable with the mind. It was more that he could focus on whatever he wanted to. He still had to pull the trigger. In their more recent technology, they have weapons that are controlled by the mind, so that only the so-called owner of the weapon can actually activate and use it. It doesn't require the use then of a trigger, but rather is mentally controlled by the weapon's owner. We're looking at a film made 30 years ago of a weapon that is, at the time, allegedly 600 years old.
Who's this holding the
Well,
weapon?
this is Alina. She's another extraterrestrial who comes from a very, very distant system in space, and she is holding the weapon here. We see not only the weapon but this gold suit. What we should tell you is that when Wendell Stevens and the investigative team first saw these photographs and films, they thought, number one, that the weapon had to be a toy, which they discovered it wasn't by searching out every toy supplier in Switzerland as well as toy stores and coming up with nothing. Likewise, they searched out through sporting goods stores and clothing manufacturers this type of an outfit, as well as simply looking for a fabric that would behave and appear as the apparent gold foil of Alina's outfit does. They couldn't find that either.
And what is this? What's with this tree?
Well, this is one of the two trees that Meier shot holes through using this weapon. This appears to be the apple tree, about 10 to 12 inches in diameter. The investigators couldn't even find a drill bit that long, and plus, as they examined the hole here, they found out that not only was it smooth as glass all the way through, but slightly oval, in addition to the round entrance and exit. There is no possible way of drilling an oval hole.
What about these pictures?
Well, this is another tree in a forest that Meier had shot a hole through. The investigators had then taken a string, tied it around the trunk, ran it through the hole, and then carried it back all the way into the forest. They found it in a straight line from the entrance point of this hole. Everything was singed or burned perfectly all the way through as far as they could walk it in the forest. But remarkably, there was no sap bubbling. There was simply clean through, immediate breaks in the branches and twigs where the beam had passed through.
With any technology that I know of could not achieve this on this Earth plane. I could not explain the type of material that I have and its discreteness by any known combination of materials. I could not put it together myself. The elements that we found were totally surprising. The major element, which is shown here, was the rare earth metal thulmium, Thulium. It was totally unexpected. So now we've seen silicon, iron, thulmium, silver, and copper, all in a specimen about this big.
When he examined the metal under electron scanning microscope, he then found the micro-machining, which was a clear evidence to him that this was a deliberately manufactured product.
We found evidence of what looks like mechanical manipulation. One sees now discrete marks in a diagonal form in this direction and marks in this direction. But what is exciting, it looks like it's been plowed. In other words, a pressure, and there is a scarfing on either side.
Do we know what this metal is used for?
We're told that these metals were representative of a number of the different stages, 7 stages of manufacturing that the Pleiadians go through to create the metal for their spacecraft.
I don't know how beneficial it would be for us. They're always more advanced than we are, so we're the savages in the jungle, and that's not always beneficial for the lesser evolved person. But they're here studying us, and we should know about it, I think.
If these ETs exist, why haven't they contacted us?
Well, actually, there's 2 answers. Number one is they certainly did try to contact us, meaning the government of the United States, in 1979. There was a letter sent to the Carter administration. But when I read that letter, I really understood why the contact didn't take place. It really was demanding such profound changes in the consciousness of people in this country that there was really no chance that they were going to go for it. Specifically, that President Carter and his administration revealed to the American people that all of the religious beliefs here are based on fantasy, nonsense, and lies.
All the world coverage of this case became a milestone in ufology, and of course the wonderful pictures and movies. For the first time, we had a strong documented cases with strong evidences, hard evidences in video, in photographs, physics, solid materials from another world to analyze, and also scores of testimonials by Billy Meier of his contacts. So I think this is at this moment is a legend in ufology.
Throughout history, we know there have been lots of times when, the world has believed, for example, that it was flat, and then it was discovered that it wasn't, and it only took maybe one or two people to believe that. So it's what we call a type 2 error in research. In other words, that you reject something that actually is true.
Die Lehre des Geistes oder das Wissen, dass die
The teaching of the Spirit, or the knowledge that is transmitted to us by the Pleiadian, is so fundamentally different from everything else here on earth.
Was ich von Sfat gelernt habe, von der ersten pleiadischen Person, mit der ich in Kontakt.
What I learned from Sfat, the first Pleiadian contact person, and that I could then process everything and go around the world with the help of the Pleiadian, and the great amount I also learned out there in the world, and the great knowledge I could draw from the storage banks, and also that from my own thinking, my own realizations, I could then start to fulfill the mission.
Die Mission dann zu erfüllen beginnen konnte. Das sind nicht einfach
All of this wasn't simply information being given to me, rather I had to work for it all by myself. The German language is the best language that one can actually have in the world in order to precisely and clearly explain everything just as it really must be. What we are disseminating from here, the center in Hinterschmidruti, is simply only a teaching. And we call that the teaching of the Spirit, or spiritual teaching, or the teaching of truth. Consciousness-related evolution is the real meaning of life.
Oder Lehre der Wahrheit. Rund 400 verschiedene Schriften, rund 40 Bücher und jedes Buch.
About 400 different texts, about 40 books, and 3,000 copies are printed of each book, which makes 120,000 books.
Also 120.000 Bücher. Das Universum, das ist schon
The universe is already very, very old, and everything took its time to come into being, even human life. The beginning is the cause from which the effect came about. It's the law of causality which has to take effect.
Kausalgesetz, das wirken muss. Der Sinn des Lebens ist die Evolution.
The meaning of life is the human being's evolution with regard to his consciousness.
Was ist Gott, Billy? Gott, das ist eine imaginäre Gestalt, die die Menschen geschaffen haben.
Billy, what is God?
God is an imaginary figure which has been created by human beings so they don't have to bear responsibility themselves. Rather, they can shift it onto a deity. But God, in and of itself, is nothing other than a title for a human being who is very highly evolved.
Gott ist also nicht das, was die Menschen irrtümlich annehmen.
God is therefore not what human beings wrongly assume, that he is the creator of life, the creator of a universe, of space. God is nothing other than a title, be it Allah or Shiva, etc.
Der versucht immer eine Macht über sich zu setzen.
The human being always tries to set a power above himself, and he calls it God. This God or this power is supposed to be responsible for him and everything and anything that he says, does, thinks and feels, and so forth, and for his fate.
Der Mensch ist für alles und jedes, das selbst denkt.
The human being is solely responsible for each and everything he thinks, does, feels, and undertakes. He must be responsible for it.
Muss das Positive und das Negative.
He must bear and savor all the positive and negative which he processes through his thoughts, actions, and feelings.